you cannot eat GDP. That is my rough way of answering it. So even we as economists, even as we kind of get excited about growth rates and charts and all that, at the end of the day, it is what do I take home? So there are two problems here. First, GDP is the income for all of us. All of us, the entire country. You know, we could say that this section are getting a lot of the share, the bigger share of the cake. And these other ones are not getting much. That is the first problem. Actually, COVID around the world has increased the inequities that we have seen in economies. So we are not talking just Kenya. I'm not talking of the COVID billionaires and millionaires, but I hope you can protect me, right? In all this, whatever I say here remains without.
You are protected, Governor. Sema ukweli yote.
Thank you. So there are people that became very rich during COVID. But where were the others? Where were the others? There are people who lost their businesses, they got closed, etc. That's what you hear. So inequities, or should we say inequalities, have become larger, not less. And that is an important thing. When you think about inequities or inequalities, you also think about inequalities about opportunities. So for instance, when they say when I complain or you complain or somebody comes to you and complains, you know, they had a bill, as I said, of somebody. One of the most, I'm like you, yeah? You are an important member of our community. When all this was going on, how many people came to you asking for money to bury somebody? It wasn't one, I'm sure. And this is not the harambe that we always do. You know those harambes, right? No, it is because people needed, they were a serious need. And then you give your pickup, you do this, you do all those other things, because people are in serious need. A lot of you also did things like provide food, yeah? We talked about Kipchoge. He actually provided a whole bunch of the runners, because they were not getting any money and they had run out of money. He gave them something to sustain on. So that is what you hear. And I think it is important to appreciate that they are not wrong when they complain. It's only that maybe we get too focused on that bottom line and not realize that actually that number can hide a lot of other things that we need to deal with. So that's my rough answer, and I think you can see where we are going with that. You talked about China inflation. China, the problem is not inflation. The problem is growth. In China, they used to grow at 10%. Yeah, I remember when a few years ago, when we were working in a different life, 7% was sort of like their bottom line, sort of like minimum. Yeah, that's the floor. 7%. Where are they now? This year they'll be less than 5%. I mean, if that is not an earthquake, I don't know what is. And this is all done by COVID. So inflation is not a problem there. But since the entire economy came to a crashing halt, their growth rate is the one that is now a big problem. And I don't know, they did have a big meeting recently, I think 2 days ago. I don't know what came out of it, but I'm curious to find out what they said about growth. But at the same time, China growth, they have a big issue, which is a bubble in the building industry. So they had been building all this, so the buildings, and mainly residential buildings, and they've just been growing like mushrooms everywhere, and banks were financing it. Now that whole growth model has come to a halt, and they have to deal with the weak banks that actually now cannot, that are sort of on the ropes, because of this sort of bubble, which will soon burst if they're not careful. So there are problems in China as well. And I think we have to learn, and I take your point, let's learn from everybody and avoid those mistakes that maybe would be very expensive. So thank you for your points. One of the things we'll be doing, and we have been working towards this, is also so that we can have, let's say, portable credit or credit rating, right? So today and now, actually we've done this. In CRBs, at times they end up treating you in a negative way. By the way, we've made progress. I'm not going to say too much about this, but we've made a lot of progress, more than, say, has been acknowledged, but that's okay. I think we want to have these conversations. But we want to get to a point where actually a good borrower, meaning one that repays, can actually benefit from that and have a lower interest rate for future lending. Quality of the currency, and then also the availability of Kenyan denomination currency. I think the first on the availability, I want to be very explicit about this. We have more than enough pieces of paper, currency, for the country. More than enough in all denominations. So it's the banks that need to request. What happens, frankly, is at times a particular bank, right, in, let's say, mind you, we are not talking, let's say, ABSA. It's not ABSA in general. You're talking ABSA Kisi, or you're talking, whatever, a particular branch, this road in Thika, that branch. They may not be good enough in terms of making their requests. It's just like any supermarket. You may go there and you find they don't have bread, but there's bread available elsewhere. But for some reason, when they ordered, they didn't order enough. And so there's a bit of, let's say, planning problem with some of the banks. And this we've seen, particularly as you were doing your elections, right? There was a lot more demand of some of those currencies, and therefore, at times they got it wrong. But I want to assure you that that is not a problem that should be with you, because it's really, and it's going to be resolved as things, as a matter of fact, at this moment, we are seeing a lot more currency coming into the central bank as opposed to going out. So I think the point I'm making here is that we will this balance will be resolved quite quickly. The question about quality of currency, Bona Speaker, this was a concern a little earlier. Today and now, if you go out there, I am willing to take a bet that you won't see dirty currency, or there'll be very little dirty currency. And the point is that we listened to you, and we did our work with the banks quietly, making sure that whatever is there is clean and of high quality. So I think the point I'm making is at the beginning there were concerns, and for several reasons, one of which is the way people are treating it, but I think also the way the currency had sort of been put out, etc. But today and now, that problem has kind of subsided, and I haven't seen it. And again, as I say, we are seeing the currency that's coming back, you understand, from all over, after your campaigns. We are seeing it coming back. So we know what we are talking about. Then what else? The issue about credit and subsidies, etc., I don't know who answered that question. These are things that we need to discuss a lot more. Why? Because it's not a one-sided thing. It's true, as the president said, and again, as you asserted, any subsidy is a cost. It's a subsidy, but at the same time, it's a cost in the sense that somebody needs to be taxed somewhere to cover that subsidy. So that balance is one that needs to be struck. And I think also there's another side of it, which is when the subsidy is removed, prices will rise, as happened with the super petrol, and therefore that will be reflected in inflation. And there will be knock-on effects. Matatus will increase their prices. I'm told that now they've increased on the Thika Road and other places, Narok, I don't know. The point I'm making is there are other considerations, and that's why it is important to have a complete 360-degree view about subsidies, etc. But the bottom line is subsidies are generally temporary. They work if it is temporary, but with time, they end up creating serious distortions in the markets, and that's why it is important to deal with them. A few questions by our Mheshimiwa Ichung'wah. We've had a lot of conversations, even remember in Bali, that famous room. We've come a long way, haven't we? I think this is something, your questions are valid, okay? I think the point here is that the conversation about the 1 million, you call it the 1 million limit. We don't think of it as a limit, but anyway, that whole thing. As I explained recently, this is something that we as central bank are working on. Why? To improve it. It's not working the way it should, because it's being used in some sense to punish you. Yeah, in a sort of, and you talked about even-handed or even playing field. I don't know, I wrote here even playing field. I don't know whether that's the word you had. And even that, there's a problem with it. It should be straightforward. It should be straightforward in the sense that, you know, my favorite example is the petrol station attendant. Yeah, so I own a petrol station, and I get, I don't know, 2 million every 2-3 days. I deposit it. When I go to the bank, they know that I own that petrol station. So why is it that they keep asking me, where did I get the money? Where did I get the money? You know, and even the banker filled his car at my petrol station. So in some sense, there has to be, let's say, some sanity in the way they deal with the customer. The KYC, know your customer, needs to be properly KYC. That they know you, they know that I run that petrol station, and every so often I bring in 2 million, etc. And so those sort of issues need to be dealt with. The other things, which is, I'll mention it and then move on, but the one that really bothers me as well is, and again, this is an example, you go to a bank, the bank has a policy. Let's say ABSA, right? It has a policy. And you go to ABSA Queensway or ABSA Westlands, and let's say you are depositing money there. And yeah, 1 million, they have no problem with it, right? Then let's say somebody else is depositing 1 million in ABSA Kitui or Kajiado. You know, the manager can say, hey, 1 million, he is Taguza, where? Enda nazo. You understand? So the manager is becoming a petite whatever, right? He's changing the rules by himself. And that gentleman that depositor has no recourse, in a sense. So we are trying to put some sanity there, but I think we need to do it correctly, because we don't want to undo some of the things that have helped us. Yeah? But we do understand it's an issue of customer pain points. That's the word I use, pain points that we need to deal with, understand them and deal with them. And we've done some work already. We do hope to see the benefits of those going forward. The last point you had was about adequate foreign exchange. I want to again assure you that yes, we do have adequate foreign exchange. What was happening is in the 2-3 years, 2-3 months, you had people that were, again, trying to bring us back to golden bug. I want to say that again. People that wanted to bring us back to golden bug. And if you remember what was happening in golden bug, this is what some of the people are pushing towards. I don't want to get into the details because, you know, they will ask me, where's the proof? Yeah, and I'll say, well, I don't have proof. You know, I'm not DCI. So, but I think the point I'm making is the hype, the pressures had nothing to do with what was happening in the markets. And what was happening is, okay, you do have some rogue traders in particular banks, and they are working to do their thing, right? And so we went after those, and we've dealt with some of them. Now, you cannot kill every single mosquito in the room, but I think the point is you have to deal with it, yeah? And I think that's the sanity. But I think also part of that was obviously, we were in a particular kipindi, politics, etc. So everything was politics. But now that we are on the other side, I think there'll be better appreciation. And I can already assure you that sanity has returned. I mean, even right actually from the beginning of, from the announcement and indeed even the recent decision by the Supreme Court, you can actually just see the numbers and you can see, the thing is coming down to where it should be, yeah? Where it should be. Obviously, it won't happen in a day, but we are getting there. And thank you for your support. Now, in terms of businesses coming into Kenya, we want good businesses to come that are founded on good business practices, etc. What we don't want is businesses that are supported by sort of illicit financial flows. Those we don't need. It's better if we die poor than get involved in those things. And I think there are many things that we should respect. We have a lot of self-respect and sort of say, well, we can do better than that. We don't need to sort of link up with people that are involved in this business in order to move forward. In terms of the other issue of you talked about the economic growth being academic, etc. I do accept that, but I thought I explained the point that what you are seeing is this sort of dichotomy of, let's say, the inequality that applies at times. I gave that example of, some of us may be doing very well, while others, our people may not be doing so well. There are some sectors that have gone under, right? You can imagine, for instance, there was a whole discussion about coffee. You talk to a coffee farmer, and you'll know how they feel, yeah? Because there was a time that coffee was king, but now they feel that it's not, or even some of the tea farmers. So now, those are just examples that maybe that closer to me in terms of top of mind. But I'm sure there are many other examples of maybe sectors and people are doing certain things and now they cannot do it. And so you see that hardship, and that's why they say hakuna pesa mashinani, because of those sort of considerations. But I think that's where we come in. That's a challenge we have. I think we should not shrink from the challenge. We should, if anything, face it and resolve it for the benefit of our population. And pending bills, as I said, pending bills, going back to MV Kenya, is a big problem. But, we have to deal with it holistically. There's no point in paying all the pending bills, and then we end up creating more. So first thing is to stop creating new pending bills. And then you also know that pending bills in the past, I was in Treasury back in 85. Yeah, young economist then. And there was that problem of pending bills. And I remember, we even had some money that was supposed to go into pending bills. We had people like Halaki, I think that was the name of the FS at the time. Yeah. But the point I'm making is that why hasn't it worked? Because at times the money that is put out for pending bills goes to do other things. Yeah, so we are too good for our own good. I think you get my point. And so the pending bills becomes this balloon of our excesses. Now, we can blame Treasury, but actually they are not the only ones to blame. Counties and also the ministries are part of the problem. Actually, one of the issues that we need to resolve is when they get allocation to pay, 100 million particular projects or particular, some of those funds at times are being diverted to other things. So that's where the issues are. But I think this has to be done correctly. I don't think the issue is just saying, okay, it's X amount, let's create a bond and resolve it. Because you don't have a contract as such. with those spending bill people, yeah? And what you may start as 500 or X may end up being 2X. And that is why actually in the last 2 years or so, there has been a project that was trying to deal with the pending bills, and the controller of budget had to go through them and sign off on them and assure the world that these are true pending bills and now they created. The trouble is she began to run into things and say, wait a second, I paid for that. What happened here? And the thing, obviously the money was diverted some other place. So I think the point here is we have to deal with the pending bills holistically. Whether 500 billion as a bond, all I'll say is last year, our domestic financing was 690 billion. 690, that's what the central bank was required to raise in domestic borrowing for the budget in the financial year. How does that compare to 500? Actually, we didn't even manage 680, we ended up at 600. So I think the point is, I would want us to have a conversation, so that we can put our 2 cents in the mix and sort of get a solution to this big problem. But I think it has to be resolved. Remember, it was the anchor that I talked about is one of those things. But I think it has to be done, all of us, together. And I hope that answers your question. You asked about the 93 million and whether it's hot air and things like that. I think the point to make, you're probably alluding to what is known as the cash flow of the government that I know was circulating over social media this weekend. And that cash flow, the government is required to publish it every single month, okay? So we see it every month. The point is that it shows the inflows, so it's a bit like, you are in how much came in, how much did you spend, and how much remained. So if you look, there are certain revenues. If you see, there are certain expenditures. And then you have the bottom line, which is what is the balance, which is that number. The fact that it is 93, in my view, is neither here nor there. Why? Because there may have been expenditures that were needed that maybe were held back in terms of pending bills or any of these other things. You understand? So this line or this table taken by itself doesn't give you a complete picture. But I think it tells you that the government had certain expenditures, it got certain flows, including loans, and it paid those expenditures, and the balance was X, or whatever the number is, the 93. Now, I'm sorry. What? It's not there? Oh, hot air. I thought that we have suddenly switched to CJ Martha Come's language. I'm not going to go there. But I think the point I'm making is that, thank you, but I think the point I'm making here is that I think the more fundamental issue is the charts I gave you, the deficit, because that tells you that we are actually spending more, living beyond our means. And you can live beyond your means for a period of time, just like you borrow for the car, or borrow for a house. So you're spending beyond your means for a period of time, but you know you're going to repay it. So it has to be, so the three of them have to be seen together. And, but I do wish you to ask that question to the PS Treasury. I'm sure he's an accountant. He'll give you a better answer to the question than I did, but that's the way I look at it, okay? But then on other questions, the Bitcoin and digital currency versus, it doesn't matter about, it doesn't relate to depreciation, meaning the two are not related. The Bitcoin, basically there are two things. It started off and they began telling us that this is going to be the next best thing in terms of payments platform. You know, it's very difficult to do more than 7 transactions an hour on Bitcoin, just because of the way it is. So it's no longer that. What it is now, it is sort of an investment, you know, a sort of, so you buy it and then it's an investment vehicle. So I don't think the issue is Bitcoin as such, but maybe more generally you're asking about digital currencies. The way we see digital currencies is the most important question we have is, what problem are they resolving? You know, so in our economy, what problem are they resolving? Are they better vehicles for, let's say, payments, you know, transactions? And the answer is no. Are they better in terms of whatever the problems it is, security, more than, let's say, your bank account or any of these things? And the answer is no. So we see it as sort of something that maybe is being hyped, but we do need to look at it carefully and figure out whether it will resolve a particular problem or not. Now, I do know you're under a lot of pressure from some of these people that are, let's say, the people that are pushing these things, because for them it is good. I can assure you I have a lot of people that have been pushing me to put our reserves in Bitcoin. You know, can you imagine that? If I did that, please take me to committee and throw away the key. Because I would have been out of my mind. That sort of craziness, I think you understand. And maybe you can do it with your own money and play around with it. Yeah? But even your own money, I'm sure your family will not let you do it, because it's a crazy sort of, very volatile. You know? So I hope we understand each other on this. Last point, is the economy doing well? My answer is, there are certain aspects of it that are going very well, yeah, taken globally. And we talked about some of the sectors. Yeah, I didn't really talk about all of them, but there's some sectors that are doing well. Post-COVID, you know, have been hit hard, quite hard. You know, the economy took, you know, 2 huge blows, COVID and then the Ukraine, yeah? All this Ukraine, and I mean, I'm talking of the price surge, etc. Relative to other countries, we've done very well. I just came back from Mauritius, where I met with, thank you, where we met with 20 other governors of Africa. And basically, where we were hanging out, they asked, hey, so Kenya, you're doing pretty well, aren't you? And I think it is true. But on the other hand, we cannot be satisfied with that. But also, at a macro level, we are doing well. We still have reserves. We still have credit is growing, etc. We've recovered from some of those things. The price of oil has more than, I mean, it was $30 back in, $30 a barrel back in March of 2020. And now it is at 3 times that. I mean, just think of that. And still we are running, and I think we are still on our feet. I think we should be proud of that. Now, having said that, there are still some problems in the system, right? And a lot of them are the ones that were being mentioned a moment ago. There are some sectors or some of our population are not getting the benefits coming to them. And we talked about that. So that is, I think, the issue. Of course, there are the bigger things that government has been unable to deal with some of the things that we generally accept are government services, health, education, or is struggling to deal with those. I mean, when you go on a road and it's potholes all over, I mean, you say, surely, or, you know, in your own constituency, they're even planting bananas on the road because they're so upset, you know, with the state of the roads, etc. I think the point I'm making here is there's other things that need to be dealt with. And so we cannot minimize this and say we are okay, growth is X%, we are happy, mambo ni sawa. No, I think we have a lot of work. And frankly, that's why we come to work every day. That's why we come to work every day. If it is not because of that challenge, then we wouldn't go to work. And there are 50 million Kenyans that are looking to us, hoping that we can provide them with opportunities. I want to finish with one last thing, Chair, yes, which is youth. We haven't said anything about youth, but what do youth want? They don't want a handout. Of course, they're going to reach for the handout if you give it to them. Yeah? But that's not what they should get. They should get opportunities. Provide them with opportunities. figure out how to create those opportunities. I gave you the example of the chicken farmers, right? I think you can think of other ways. They don't necessarily, those opportunities may not be in an office, behind a desk or things like that. But I think there's a lot that they need, opportunities. That is, to me, the rallying call for what we should do with the youth. But anyway, it's in your hands.
Thank you, Governor. Honorable members, I want to terminate the engagement with the governor now.
Thank you.
Because listening, 1 minute, Honorable Carrier, listening to our interventions, I think the streak is the same. And we've got the point. Allow me to call our next president. Okay, Carrier, you'll be the very last.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My hand had been up from the very first round, and I'm glad I caught your eye. Governor, this question is straight to the point. We have companies that are registered as communication companies that are doubling up as banks. As it is right now, they fall and are regulated under the Communications Authority. But because they're also transacting money, there are some regulations that come from central bank that they depend on. My question is, from where you sit as central bank, how can this parliament help you with legislation? And would that legislation mean that we break these telecommunication companies into different operating units where the communication sits on its own and they are regulated by Communications Authority, and they have a unit that is transacting in money that will be regulated specifically from central bank? Is this a law that is required from Parliament, or is it central bank regulations that will separate these operations of the telcos? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. So I think here, before I answer your question, this is where you see if all the arms of government are working together, we can go very far. Legislation, the judiciary, the executive, I don't know where we are. We are an agency of the executive, of course, in this thing. Because the law actually is there. And I would want you to ask me that question in January. Because actually, we want to be sure that those sort of issues are dealt with. We have to understand where we came from. Meaning, when we started off, we didn't know what we were dealing with. Remember, we were like the first car down the road, so nobody knows how this thing. But we've done a lot to regulate all these payment service providers. Today, for instance, you can go and check on our website, and you'll see the names of all the payment service providers. We were not doing that before. You can see who it is, etc. Anyway, the point I'm making is that is one important thing to secure the operations, let's say, on the money side. So I think we are on our way in this path. We also know the history, meaning you are very concerned. I'm talking of the 12th Parliament. They are very concerned about some of those things. But I think we are now, let's say, much further ahead in this thing. So if you would just be patient, ask the question. Next time I see you, ask me that question, hopefully before the end of the year, but definitely by January. Thank you very much.